Welcome to the Mindcraft podcast. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I am here with the amazing Peter Plumeau and Michelle Hobbs of the Reframe Lab, which is a design and strategy firm. So I'm going to welcome them and let them proceed to tell you what that all entails. So, welcome, Peter and Michelle. I'm so happy to have you and grateful to have you on the Minecraft show today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Michelle, we talked about passing the torch because the dynamic duo here has a lot to share with us with some super just innovative, sort of innovative strategies for what work used to look like and what work is beginning to look like since the pandemic. And so I'm going to pass the torch, I believe, to Michelle and see if you want to get us started with what your firm does around all that.
Sure. Yeah, so Peter and I came together shortly after the pandemic, actually, and having quite different experiences, but a common thread. So, yeah, I come from a design background. I've been a practicing graphic designer for many, many years, but I shifted into organizational training and problem solving. And Peter has been an executive for a long time, leading engineering consulting firms, and we came to a point where we're like, things are just not done in a way that's useful nor productive, and we get in the way of ourselves. And having experienced working in teams, leading teams, we came together with this point of view of there's got to be a better way. And we were definitely adept at starting to research different methods and methodologies, and just exploring how teams come together, how they communicate with each other, how does leadership guide teams through change. And change is that constant, right? That is the opportunity, whether someone comes in new leadership or team dynamics change, products change, services change, markets change. There's always change. And how you manage through change is a great opportunity, and often places that are people are not as adept or don't go deep enough to explore who they're changing and why. So, right, a pandemic happened and it really shifted how we met, how we logged in our work, where we did our work, how we defined our work, particularly in white collar office environments, and just wanted to explore how we could make that better. And there's a lot of legacy systems that I think were turned on their heads during this moment, and we really wanted to capitalize to give people a chance to innovate and really rethink how they work.
I love that.
Yeah, and Michelle, excellent points. And I think that's a nice way to sort of lead into the origin of our name. We spent a lot of time thinking about this and came up with the name Reframe Lab because, it really kind of crystallized exactly what we like to think we're all about, which is helping firms, helping organizations, look at the challenges they're facing through fresh and new perspectives. That's the reframe part. And then we really we're curious people, and we like to do what we can to help organizations, be more innovative, experiment even, and, recognize that it's rare that one size, if you will, fits all of any particular organizational solution. So that's sort of the lab side of things. Let's try this and see how well it works and so forth. So sort of custom tailored solution. And I think what, the firms and organizations that have worked with us have, found is that their teams are becoming more empowered to really kind of embrace and actually thrive within, within the changing world around us. And, one other thing about our, Michelle mentioned or referenced, human centered. That's a big part of change management in any setting, any organization that I think is often, if not forgotten, given kind of lip service to. But the fact is that an organization is made up of human beings. And, from our perspective, it's the human beings that need to kind of change in order to make any change initiative, change management strategy successful. So that's kind of, I guess, a short story, a short um, version of where we came from and where we're hopefully going.
Well, I absolutely love that, and you both were very, very, solid with stating. It was funny, the obvious to many of us, not the obvious to all of us, right? The human-centered piece. You say human beings are coming to work every day with their lives.
Mhm.
When they walk in the door, they don't walk in with only the employee, right? With everything going on in their lives, and so I want to ask you, what do you, in your opinions, if you can think of, or stories even okay, but what do you think? Let's just say one, maybe for right now, one of the biggest struggles that you've seen with companies or agencies, business organizations, whatever, coming out of, sort of emerging from when the world closed and everybody was terrified and toilet paper went flying off the shelves, to now we're back after being in our pajamas halfway down here, and it's, work from home look. What has been the biggest struggle as far as re-entry? I think like a space shuttle. What's the biggest struggle with re-entry into now we're back?
For me, I mean, I've observed, everyone was trying to figure out the right hybrid work policy and defining, okay, we're in Tuesday, Wednesday, we're out Thursday or Friday, creating these kind of definitions around when the work is, but not how the work is done. And so there's these new tools thrown at us, Zoom and Teams. All of a sudden we had these Slack, and new technology was just coming at us so fast. And folks were trying to understand and experiment. Well, everyone knew email and everyone knew video conferencing. But then we had this whole other cloud dynamic that folks just didn't really understand or define a way to use. It would just made some assumptions. Well, we store files here and we email there, and then we have video conferences. But this whole, I would say, an operating system of how do we work and when do we work and why do we use the tools that we do, versus let's just jump in and just use them. I think folks were getting really caught up with, I have too many emails, I have too many video conferences, I'm not getting my work done. I show up in the office on my one day in the office and no one else is there, or I'm not really doing anything with other people. So there hasn't been a lot of conscious or intent, into why we work, where we work, and for what purpose. So
And
that's something.
and Michelle, if I could, sorry, I just, ironically, I've often thought that what happened with all the technology you were referencing, that it kind of just sprayed out of a fire hose at us, if you will, as the pandemic, got going, and every software and internet provider was trying to say, here, use our tool. And, granted, everything obviously has probably gotten much better technologically as, the years have gone on here. But initially, it was almost the ironically totally antithetical to what the kind of the concepts of design thinking actually say, which is, your customers, your users should be driving what you actually produce or design. And in this case, it was, here's all this great stuff. Go run with it. And, there was, I don't know if I'd call it pushback, but there certainly was a lot of, well, should we be Teams? Should we Slack? Should we be Zoom? And can you do this on that platform? And oh, this platform makes that one crash, and people getting frustrated. And so, it was kind of, to me, it's just a sort of an irony, if you will, of that time. There was such a rush to provide these supposedly, helpful tools to help us get through that time in our history. But, there wasn't a lot of deep thought as to what people maybe really need.
I think that's fantastic. And Peter, partway through, I kind of like, part of me went there because you know what? If there's all this going on with the employees, that brings me straight to how did this affect the leaders? It's so easy to just go after a leader, just, they're not doing this, without actually being in their shoes, also experiencing a pandemic with their families, with teenagers in high
Yes.
school, with, everything that everybody else went through. And it can be very easy to put a bullseye on a leader, like boom, What in both of your opinions, do you think one of the biggest struggles has been for leaders in the business world post-pandemic?
Well, maybe I'll start, from my personal experience as leader of a national consulting firm when the pandemic happened and for the couple of years afterwards. Um, it was really disorienting, for one thing. Um, we had literally less than a week's notice of the likely need to go remote. Um, and as a leader, whether you have a whole crew of people supporting you directly or you're on your own, um, your mind is roiling. What do I do here? What's the most important thing? Well, in my case, and I think a lot of leaders' cases, it was, how do we keep the business going uh, in a sustainable way, and keep my people who make this business go, actually, keep them productive in a way that is, sustainable. And in our case, because my firm worked literally all over the world, um, we had the advantage, on the one hand, of being able to go remote fairly easily in terms of people working from home. But on the other hand, we were so used to all more or less being in the office all the time, unless we were, traveling, and having that social camaraderie and the drop by your office moments and so forth. That the loss of that, you know, the immediacy, the fast, cold turkey loss of that was disorienting for a lot of people. And I'll say particularly, unfortunately, for some of the younger people who are relatively new to their careers, to the world of work, who had been expecting and were used to having, sort of a supportive mentor coaching environment, they're sitting on their bed in their apartment at home with their laptop on their knees every day, and we still have the same work, if you will, to get done. And uh, I'm no expert on the psychology of video conferencing versus face to face, but I will say, we and other firms I'm familiar with, other leaders, experience a significant increase in mental health challenges among their employees during that time because of the isolation, but also because I think of the kind of being thrown into this new situation without really knowing what's going to happen. The uncertainty was, I think, and maybe remains a fairly significant um, uh, consideration for a lot of employees, a lot of firms. That is a lingering thing from the pandemic. Michelle, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, right. There's so much pressure, right? A leader's got to guide so many people and so many different types of people doing different types of work in a space that's uncertain. So we try to engage leaders and have them try to tap into this collective knowledge and to give them an opportunity to not have to feel like they are alone, but to actually come up with ways to engage their teams in problem solving and kind of navigating the uncertainty together, either through collaborative means or more meaningful meetings or workshops that help people really help their teams. Let's define the problem. Okay, where is the communication challenge right now? How are we How can we increase productivity in a way that's meaningful and sustainable? What does sustainability mean? What does that mean to you when I hear it? And what does it mean to me when I'm hearing it from you? So, getting clear about language, trying to avoid assumptions, but also creating a safe psychological space where you can kind of voice concerns and experiences and explain them in a way that doesn't isolate or blame, but creates a collaborative, collective understanding of, hey, here's our work right now. Here's who our clients are. Here's who we're serving. What are they going through, and how's that affecting our work, and how does that affect how we deliver what we do as a service or as a product? But to create, don't go it alone. You tap into that collective knowledge, and you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised what you don't know. Yeah, and you'd be surprised how many interesting and really useful ideas are out there if folks are given the opportunity to be in a space to work specifically on those challenges together.
Well, I think you tap
Yeah, and
into
I
some.
think for leaders in particular, you know, there is this phenomenon. I don't know if it's a phenomenon, but there is a reality where I think a lot of leaders sometimes often think they're doing the best for their people and they're treating their people fairly and well, and they're friendly and watching out for them and so forth. But at the same time, as Michelle just referred to, this idea of clear communication, avoiding assumptions and so forth. A few years ago, a writer or a business professor at Columbia University, Adam Galinsky, wrote an article in the Times, in the New York Times, called "When You're in Charge, Your Whisper May Feel Like a Shout." And basically, his thesis is leaders, bosses, managers need to understand that every word they say in one way or another um, is is gauged by all the people who report to them. That, and if you sometimes you may be seen to be speaking in code, that would, and people are left to think, what does he really mean by that, or what is she really saying? And so that kind of can undermine morale. It can make people feel stressed out. It can make them feel anxious. And it goes back to what Michelle was saying about you know thinking about communication and collaboration in your organization. You don't want people guessing what you're thinking with regard to priorities or project budgets or whatever it is. There's no reason to do that. I think in most cases, I think it's probably done a lot more than it really is necessary. And striving for clarity of
Mm-hmm.
communication, organizational transparency can do a lot for um, productivity, morale, um, camaraderie, and organizational effectiveness when you pull all those things together. And I think we've seen that in several of the places that we've worked with, where we've gone in and sort of diagnosed, what one maybe would call a transparency issue writ large, and kind of help the leader and the leadership team take measures to sort of break through that problem.
Well, yes, Peter, I 100% agree. And as workplace or business consultants, I think the three of us are pretty aware that communication issues are usually at the top of the pyramid, and then right below those, often, at least what I found, is the assumption making, the brain taking shortcuts, and mind reading, right? Especially if it's
Yeah.
text and email, because there's not even a face or an intonation or anything. Combined with often not always, the issue of taking things personally. Those two things seem to be in a nice long-term relationship together, which are underneath the the communication umbrella. And I agree 100% with both of you that the pandemic, I think that those things were there like forever. with communication.
Hmm.
But then
Yeah.
when the pandemic just turned everything, forgive the expression, but ass over tea kettle. Couldn't really come up with
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
um, and it sounds like, thank goodness for, we have these amazing two co-founders here, the Reframe Lab, to have such an organization that is sort of built upon pivoting out of this old thing that's not working anymore. We clearly know what was working before. Either some things might need to go entirely, some might need to be tweaked, but it needs a facelift, right? And so maybe the two of you can comment on how what that looks like, and maybe how the whole idea of 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 work, what that how that's changed, because you're changing with it very successfully. So Peter and Michelle are changing, or being, I should say, rephrase myself, the dynamic duo here are kind of catalysts for change, and they're doing lots and lots of good, making differences in lives. Because think about it, I like to think of work as like finding a good mattress. I think Peter and I talked about that. Well, think of the hours we spend at work.
Right.
Do we want to spend 40 plus hours being miserable? I don't think so. And so maybe you can share with the listeners what you're doing that's different, that's taking a new direction in a human-centered way to make people help people be happier in the workplace.
Yeah, some of the work that we do, obviously in office-based work in white-collar environments, like, a typical opportunity for folks to get together is through retreat, and oftentimes that's seen as a moment of team building, right? And you could be doing ropes courses, or you could be doing interesting, really fun, engaging games with your team. I'm trying to encourage founders, particularly folks who are trying to scale their teams up and have started something and have grown their teams around this idea, especially in an entrepreneurial space, and you're getting them on board to the dream, and you're rolling and you're producing, and then you kind of don't really understand quite who knows what and how they know it. So I try to get teams together to, one, talk about not just the work that they do now, but the past work that they've done that's really been meaningful and successful for them, because we're carrying all of these experiences with us when we go to any job. And certainly people understand, that what their best days at work were and want to be. And so I try to give leaders and founders an opportunity when they get their teams together in person, especially if they're hybrid or remote, to really get their teams to express what those best days look like. What does that mean? What does that mean to them? It builds trust. It builds relationships, and it gives you a peek into what really excites and motivates people in a different way that a survey couldn't really do, or even a one-on-one interview couldn't do. So to really capitalize on those moments when you're together, to not only, yes, have fun together, but go further in your knowledge, go further in your histories, and really try to elevate the strengths of those teams, so they can really get those ideas off the ground.
Yeah. And, I like, again, going back to the human-centered kind of construct, you know, in a professional environment, whether it's say a social services agency or a tech company, um, I sincerely believe that the vast majority of people who work at those places are there because they feel personally connected to the mission or the outputs of that organization. You know, I don't think a lot of people, despite what some TV shows might have us believe, go into their careers hoping to make a ton of money, to become rich. They want to do something that is fulfilling, that makes change happen, that has a mission oriented with it. And what we're seeing, and I think this should not be that much news to anyone, is as the new generations enter the workforce, Generation Z and now Gen Alpha, as it's known, which I guess is the current young people generation. And you even see this with millennials to some extent. Um, they're much, much more oriented towards um, mission and, making a change, making a difference than climbing the old-fashioned career ladder. And that's important again for organizations and leaders to recognize that these old-fashioned, if you will, industrial era, climb the career ladder, enter, go to management level, get up to the C-suite or whatever, is not what most of these people apparently really want, according to many surveys that are out there. Again, that's this make a difference. What's my mission? What's my part in this, in what we're trying to achieve here? And that has led some firms and organizations to try to create what are called dual career ladders or dual career paths, where you have sort of the traditional management track, but then you have a parallel sort of subject matter expert or SME track. And the idea there is to allow people who either don't want to be managers or maybe are not well suited to be managers still have a career path, an upward career path in that organization. So it isn't so much that old-fashioned up or out kind of model where the only way forward in your career is to rise to management, whether or not you want to be there, whether or not you should be there. And I would say to firms and organizations today that are looking at the new generation coming in as the people like me, the old generation, start heading out, they've got to kind of take that seriously because I think there's a lot of young people out there who don't fear going from job to job, firm to firm, organization to organization, whatever. That's actually, I'm sure, Kim, you've seen them too. There are statistics out there about someone who enters the workforce today will, have an average of 12 jobs during their career or something like that. And, just one generation ago, that was almost unheard of. I mean, I'm a late baby boomer, and it was still the thing that you had that one job your entire life. So in literally one generation, more or less, we've seen this massive shift. And going back to what Michelle was saying, um, you know, this has been sort of hyper accelerated, I think, by the pandemic and the impacts it had on workplaces, on organizations, on people thinking about, does this job have meaning?
So I love that, Peter, because it makes me think of back, which was actually before us, really, back in the 50s, when it was back then, it was usually the man was the provider, that whole thing. He would work 40 years, get the gold watch, the cake, and then see you later. Often dropped dead of a heart attack right afterwards because he was miserable for half of it. But it's just changed. It's changed dramatically. And like you're saying, Peter, we can either dig our sort of dig our heels in and to try to resist it, or we can flow like a river with it and work to be vehicles for change, for really how things are starting to map out, play out.
I mean, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about what we see ourselves as all about, which is this, reframing the issues and then, experimenting, iterating on them to figure out what you really need to do. How can we turn this challenge of Gen Alphas into an opportunity for us?
I love
Can we
that.
become the firm that every Gen Alpha wants to work for because we get them or something like that.
I think
Yeah, I
that's
think
fantastic.
clarifying intent,
Yeah.
and making, what is the value prop, not just for your customers and the people you serve, but the people who work for you. Like, why is it valuable to be here together when we are together? Why is it valuable for you to give the extra push on this initiative, when we need that extra? I sense with some folks who are of um, a certain era that we pushed for overtime, and that was the expectation, and the result was you could accelerate to another position, or you would see those gains personally and not collectively. And did you really have to be able to make the value, you have to be able to illustrate the value for everyone in every stage of career development, not just the young ones, but the older folks who are learning new methods as well. And if you create a space of learning and curiosity, then it just demonstrates by example, okay, this is the culture we're setting out to build, and that we're always learning and we're always experimenting. And design thinking does promote small experiments. We don't have to study things for months and months before we can implement a change. There's lots of micro changes that could happen, or scale changes that could happen in an organization. And you have to make some key measurement decisions. Like, what does success look like? When do we meet the bar? Or when do we say that's enough? Or when do we shift and look at a different course? And be really clear about why that's true, and what we're out to get, what that benefit looks like, and articulate it in a way that people can understand and make it tangible, versus so esoteric or so, high level that it's just like, it just, these are just words. I don't know how that translates. So it is important for leaders to be able to translate either those larger ideas into more tactical places where people work the day in and day out, the week to week.
And we've helped at least a few firms and organizations. I mentioned earlier that we often go in on an engagement. The first thing we do is what we call a diagnostic process. Like, here's what you said you want to achieve. What's your current situation and what's in the way of that? And in at least a couple of places, we've gone in, they said, we want to do a change initiative to get from X to Y in the way we do this thing. And we've gone in and sort of opened their eyes, if you will, to the reality that they're not ready to do a change initiative because, as Michelle was saying, like the transparency and the clarity of
Yes,
communication isn't there. And that's job number one in any real change initiative.
absolutely. Number one,
Yeah,
got to have clarity.
absolutely.
Well, this, I think, is a wonderfully organic place to probably wind it up. And I'll tell you, I am elated with this conversation because such a timely and much needed conversation. And we're not just the Gen Zs. The Gen Zs get a bad rap because they actually want balance. They don't want to work and be miserable 14 hours a day until they're 50, get a cake and go watch and drop dead. So that's good. But as you said, Michelle, it's not just the younger ones, us seasoned folks. Seasoned sounds so much nicer than old.
I like that.
Seasoned, just like good wine, right? I
Yeah.
really, where I'm hearing from both of you, which is what really has captivated me through this whole thing. When you say human centered, really what you're talking about is valued centered, valuing that person. Like, it's not just the employee, like we said, it's that whole person, whether they've been there for a while or they're new or they're somewhere in the middle, and that we can find a place for people by moving and shifting. And then I also heard through the conversation a sort of strengths based approach as well, where we're kind of sifting out who brings what to the table. I can't think of a better blueprint for a successful business than that. So just we'll restate this. And by the way, I'm going to reintroduce. We have Peter Plumeau and Michelle Hobbs, co-founders of the Reframe design and strategy firm. I would highly suggest that you reach out to them, for workplace coaching or anything like that, potentially speaking. And their information will be below the podcast in the blurb. For right now,
Or even just coffee, or a drink.
coffee or drinks good too. And I know that the website, we can also say it. They're going to see it, but go ahead and say your website.
Reframelab.co. Reframelab.co.
Okay, so it's going to be underneath, and you can feel free to reach Peter and or Michelle there. And any closing comments before we let you go?
It's just been a lot of fun, Kim. Thank you so much for having us, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
We can
Really
definitely
fun.
do this again. I'm feeling like there might be another one, so we'll talk about that. And the listeners tend to really like that, actually, when there's this a really good rock solid guest speaker or guest speaking team wants to come back and finish it. We're all about it. So thank you, Peter and Michelle, for using your very valuable life minutes in this way. It was an honor and a privilege to have you here in the Minecraft podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.